All right, I came across a couple of letters from Danny Riley. He's the Ed Brown supporter that was walking their dog, and the dog sniffed out some feds in the woods. Very similar to the story of Ruby Ridge, where the feds, Lon Horiuchi, shot Vicky Weaver in the head while she's holding the baby, and then they also killed his son. So, in any event, this is a 10-page letter written by Danny Riley, Terre Haute, Indiana. Terre Haute, yeah, you guys know that's the CMU for political prisoners, right? March the 11th, 2013. And this is a 10-page letter. I just want to get to know more about the mindset of Danny Riley. I found another letter that I'll read as well, and let's get started here. So somebody posted this online. I guess it was Donna. Donna, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Those are the words not only to live by, but to die for. All right-thinking men and women must know their liberty is under direct attack by the reprobates in New York that are in power. With a manly commitment to liberty, we must act. We must do something to take back our liberty. We must open a front by filing a lawsuit challenging these scoundrels' new means of oppression. We cannot and must not sit around hoping some other New Yorker does something to overturn this most destructive act to the liberty of all the citizens of New York State. Nothing can be at once more stupid and more wicked than this militia rifle ban, and in no way should it be tolerated by a free nation. Andrew Cuomo is the greatest liar amongst men. He speaks with a cloven tongue of falsehood, trying to deceive the people with baseless reasoning. All that he says with regards to the right to bear arms is quite false, and said without authority or reason. He speaks with lavish words, but empty of matter. Who believes this worthless wretch? He cannot move the mind of anyone who is not a fool. Far more terrible is the fact that he and his cohorts in the legislature are an internal enemy of their country, and for that reason most dangerous. The shysters in the state legislature are just as bad. Their weak and perverted reasoning to try and justify this disarming of the militia of New York is the most remote from the truth. With the speed and secrecy with which these enemies of liberty passed this law makes it clearer than daylight that it was done in accordance with an examination it was done not in accordance with an examination into the truth, but rather a play on the people's passions and emotions. It is hardly possible for a wise man to believe otherwise. Apparently, the New York Assembly, Senate, and Governor cannot fancy themselves free unless they deprive others of their freedom. Most of them consist of men and women of worthless character and desperate fortunes who care only about their self-interest and the agenda of their party. They must have a slavish devotion to the cause of tyranny. Their actions say so. Does Andrew prefer to be called the high priest of Saint Tyranny or Saint Slavery? A governor in word, but an enemy in deed. O advocate of slavery, why do you collectively punish the free people of New York for what some mentally deranged individual did in Connecticut, an event whose facts are far from being truthful, related to the people by the state-controlled media, whom take the pleasure in strangulation of the truth? Andrew Cuomo, what a sorry excuse for a human being, you bold-faced buffoon. You are driven blindly by wicked ambitions and stupidity and the obvious ignorance of the truth. You are mad. Your madness has used up your reasoning, that you are forced like a cuckoo to croak the same ill-omened song over and over again. Gun control, gun control, gun control. You are a ranting cuckoo, sir. You lay your snares, exclaiming to the sovereign people that they do not need more than 7 bullets to kill a deer, as if deer hunting is the zenith of the Second Amendment. You shamelessly vomit out your poison that only those wicked minds have been crushed beneath ignorance and would give it credibility. O public pimp of slavery, you are a stain on liberty. Andrew, you have no taste of virtue and the liberty which is born of it. You prefer the partialities of faction over the truth. You are a worthless mannequin. Sheldon Silver, that harebrained purse snatcher from Manhattan, who has made it his career of delivering us from liberty and handing us over to the slavery of socialism, you are a most worthless of mortals, who pushes his agenda of bigger government and more government-controlled socialism for your billionaire backos in Manhattan. Selling smoke as you do to the people, you have turned New York into one of the most heavily taxed states and one of the worst rated for private businesses. And now you are disarming the citizens of New York. Just you try and deny that. Oh, you wicked career politician, you should be handed over to Satan, the plague and pest that you are. You and the state legislature you are part of have bid adieu to reason a long time ago. You're all a pack of willful and natural liars, especially those tyrants who voted to disarm the militia. Together, the Assembly, Senate, and Governor are one entire mass of corruption, a mass of impurity, for whose breath comes the writing of laws that may be put to good use as toilet paper. You have turned down from our electoral representatives to our enemies. You carry no weight with all right-minded and sensible people who can easily see through your dreamy fabrications. Christ freed all men, and you are trying to reduce them to slavery. Haven't you a conscience? Amidst the groans and lamentations of the people, I ought to see and hear the citizens of New York are inflamed with righteous anger towards our enemy. We are being dangerously misled to believe that somehow disarming the people will somehow make us safer. Common sense and reason whisper to us, don't be fooled. It is part of a scheme of control and power. As the 17th century philosopher John Locke, who was an inspiration to our founding fathers, let us know that when a state attempts to get its citizens into absolute power, the state thereby put itself into a state of war with its citizens. I trust not that there is no one, at least in his right mind, who would not admit that we are approaching the threshold where the dogs of war can be heard beginning to growl. But before we appeal to heaven, we must first exhaust our appeal on earth. We do not have a right to insurrection, but we do have a right to revolution, as it is enshrined in our foundational document, the Declaration of Independence. If this heinous act of disarmament of the citizens' militia is not annulled, then we are left with no choice but to appeal to the remedy our venerable ancestors have shown us. My fellow concerned citizens, think of it this way. We the people are bees. Individually, we are weak and impotent and not operating in our sovereign capacity. But united, we become a formidable adversary to our enemy. Our hive is the Bill of Rights. The honey contained within the hive is the Second Amendment, without which the hive has no sustenance. When our enemy attempts to take any portion of our honey, we must together resist any such attempt until it is thwarted, drawing on our honey for dynamics in defense of our hive, i.e. liberty. Like the bees, we may lose 25% or even 50% of our people, but the enemy is vanquished, the honey preserved, and the pupas will live to enjoy liberty. And all who died deserve the highest honors and praises known to mankind, and we will never be forgotten, as they will be etched in the pages of history forever. The bee simply defended the hive at all cost, because it is instinctively known to them that it is their duty. This is done without question or complaint. The American people should learn this important lesson from the bees. But before we reach out for our liberty tools, militia rifles, and form up our ancient militia units, we must seek our remedy first in the courts. Only then, when the courts too have acquiesced in the disarmament of our militias by ignoring our natural right to bear arms as enshrined in the Second Amendment, can we constitute our position of having been forced to undertake a war in our just and lawful defense. The social contract enshrined our unalienable right to bear arms, which is the root and source of our liberty. The New York Senate, Assembly, and Governor have usurped this ancient precedent, which goes to the very core of the sovereign power of the people. The coming lawful war we will be forced to wage is nothing more than the execution of justice against them who refuse law. Never confuse the people with their government. A government that acquires great power for itself to the destruction and ruin of the people should not be called government, but an enemy, as it does things which enemies do, such as an attempt to disarm, which should not be appeased by any peace. For those who do harm under the guise of governing are worse than open enemies. Let me read that again. For those who do harm under the guise of governing are worse than open enemies. Can there be any question of the lawfulness of raising war against tyranny in defense of our civil liberties and sovereignty? Such lawful war cannot be called an insurrection if we are fighting against a thing commanded, though established it is unlawful, and that we first sought all due means of redress, and there no man is further bound to the law. I understand the words I write are heavy to the mind. The truth is more than not the truth is more than not disturbing. Yet digest my words, for the spring from common sense and reason. Our minds must understand the who, what, where, when, and why with regards to our current circumstances. Otherwise, the state media will attempt to keep our minds predisposed and focused on non-relevant, inconsequential, or inferior issues, all contrived to deceive. Unfortunately, many of our fellow citizens have fell under the spell of the state media. What these unprincipled, unscrupulous New York politicians have done is nothing short of treason. These same politicians who, impelled by the stupid and half-insane spirit of faction based in self-interest, would hurry our land into revolution. Socialism's tenet requires a disarmed populace. I can speak for myself, having no right to speak for others, and do say that if I belonged to a party organized on the basis of creating a socialist state, knowing myself, I would instantly quit it. The government of New York State, as well as many others, have lost its purpose as measured by the touchstone of liberty. The enemies of the Second Amendment have been agitating for generations, and this agitation has recently reached the point of nearing revolution in New York State. Any politician who wants to restrict law-abiding citizens' right to firearms cannot sincerely be concerned about the public's safety and security. One cannot deny that any restrictions having to do with the private ownership of militia firearms are correlative to a loss of liberty. We cannot escape the fact that our liberty is directly contributable to the private ownership of militia firearms. If the people can incrementally be deprived of their force of arms by government, then the people cannot and will not maintain their sovereignty over their government. If the people are not able to properly equip themselves with the arms needed to defeat oppressive government, then the people are bound to suffer the oppression. A people equipped with arms capable of resisting tyrannical government, liberty will survive. Without them, liberty will surely wilt and die. For we know the oppressor never lets the oppressed go without a fight. Our position is one that morality will not let us retreat from, and which principle will not let us compromise. The Second Amendment gives the people the right to bear every type of firearm that is borne by the regular military. The principle was recognized in the United States Supreme Court, U.S. v. Miller 307, U.S. 174, 1939. There can be no compromise upon it. On this principle we must hold firm as with a chain of steel. Confronted with a common foe, the American people should, by the instinct of self-preservation, be united. The recent actions of certain governments must suffice to convince many who have formerly doubted the enemy's purpose of attacking the institution of the Second Amendment. The undying opposition to the private ownership of militia weapons in the United States means a war is being waged upon this vital institution of liberty, and our enemy will not stop until they have obliterated it. Working with vast energy and singleness of purpose, the people can always nullify an unpopular law by refusing to permit it to be enforced. Did the New York State Legislature expect they can pass incendiary legislation and not be taken to task for it? If there is a general submission now, there never will be in the future maintenance of our rights. The people of the New York State will be false. The people of New York State will be false to their rights if they fail to rebuke the enemy's lies. The American people as a whole must stand side by side with our brethren of New York. The people with a spirit erect and unbroken must defy the enemy's false assertions about the Second Amendment and anxiously await the triumph of the truth. The banning of militia rifles in New York State has caused great excitement in the public mind. With the same madness, Andrew Cuomo and his ignominious legislature passed this perfidious law. They believe the free people of New York are going to abide by it. Their madness has left them sadly mistaken. Revolution and violence is smoldering just below the surface. Doesn't the tyrant Cuomo know that well-disciplined and armed militias stand as perpetual sentinels on the outpost of the Second Amendment? Patriots bearing arms in defense of their liberties is an exercise of the highest function of a free people. They are waiting to be made martyrs, not by the violence they attend, but by the character of the government they attack. A government that is bent on enslaving them under socialism. Oh, Saint Tyranny, don't you realize that you have the country of New York heading straight into unmeasurable trouble? The crisis inflicted upon us is a grave one. Needed are dedicated men and women who want to preserve the principles of the Second Amendment in order that liberty may preserve. I personally prefer annihilation to submission. Knowing that New York State embodies a noble race of free men, they will most assuredly commit themselves to the Second Amendment's necessary survival, not as a threat, but as an accomplished fact, armed for violence, being content to risk their lives. Let our actions be guided by the harsh necessities of the situation. Our goal is to sustain the integrity of the Second Amendment against the designs of the wicked men engaged in organized treason. We need to stay active and alert as if we were in the presence of an enemy contemplating to surprise us. Take as our guide a clear conscience and a fearless heart. Andrew Cuomo, that reckless and unprincipled tyrant, has underestimated the people of New York. Yes, the people have handled their government with a velvet glove, but the government seems to have forgotten a hand of iron gives the velvet glove its form. As a nation of poker players, Americans know when to bluff and know when they got the winning hand. And this is not a bluff. In closing, I believe the free people of New York will not let fear stop them from making a stand. And if the war should come, and if we must again baptize in the blood of sacred principles for which our forefathers bled in the last revolution, we shall not show the world that we are degenerate sons and daughters, but we will redeem the pledges they gave, preserve the rights they transmitted to us, and prove our determination and valor shines as bright as theirs did in 1776. War or slavery. In a choice of these evils, war may not always be the worst. Sometimes the power of resistance consists in no small degree in meeting the enemy at the outer gate, meaning to take the fight to the enemy. But for now, we stand firmly entrenched in our beliefs as we await the enemy's assault, because as free men and women, we do not register our liberty tools and we refuse to submit. Hence the storm clouds are gathering, and the tea sits aboard the ships in the harbor waiting to be thrown overboard, accompanied by the war cry of liberty. Simply put, repeal the banning of militia rifles or suffer the wrath of sovereign people. The tyranny of disarming the militias of New York State is morally wrong, and everyone knows that things morally wrong cannot endure. On that note, I conclude by simply stating, take good care. Please post online, CC to the world. Okay, that's one letter. Let me bring up the second one. That was written, I think, on March the 11th. Okay, I've also got one written here on February the 28th of 2013. This is a 5-page letter, and here goes. Bill, people who think like us are the mainstream. We are the true Americans who must carry on the tradition and principles that our revered forefathers fought and bled for in the American Revolution. In order to transmit to us, their posterity, the blessing of liberty, the principles were commonly referred to as the old Whig principles, or republicanism. Republicanism's principles stand for a government as limited as possible, a government that is frugal with the least amount of taxation, government most at the local level, government that borrows only when absolutely necessary. Individualism is more important than collectivism. Government stays out of the people's lives as much as possible. Honesty, integrity, and a high standard of morals. These principles can longer be found. I think he means no longer be found in the governments within the United States. Our country is going to have to be restored by us right-thinking Americans who hold these principles dear. We are the true Americans who think for themselves and have not deceived by our enemy's mass media. Our enemy, the moneyed interest, brainwashes our countrymen with ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, all major newspapers, all major magazines, etc., forming opinions for all those who cannot think for themselves and lack common sense and reason. I think of Mao Zedong, the brutal dictator of communist China. From 1958 to 1961, Mao seized all the food from the Chinese people to use as currency for his military buildup. Over 38 million people died. Millions more were tortured, killed, or sent to prison labor camps. But millions still cheered and loved these wicked, evil dictator. Why? Mao had control over the mass media, so he was able to keep the Chinese people brainwashed and kept them from the truth to what was really happening and the cause of it. These deceived Chinese were the majority, but that does not make their beliefs right. They were not the mainstream. They were the destroyers of their fellow countrymen. The point is, whoever controls the mass media or has the ability to get their argument, point of view, or agenda into the minds of the non-thinking herd of humans will be able to control that herd and use it to their advantage. Our enemy, the money cabal, uses the tyranny of public opinion to get their socialist frontmen elected, like the scallywag Obama. There will always be an unthinking herd waiting to be told what to think. Unfortunately, these two are our enemies. No person in their right mind with their facilities about them would choose to live under socialism. We cannot and must not let the unthinking herd drag us into the doldrums of socialism, as is and has been happening in our country. Socialism is the antithesis of republicanism. A socialist government is a despotic government, and fear is the first principle of a despotic government. Men and women who fear do not have courage. Ask yourself, do the American people seem courageous or fearful to stand up against the enemy's government? Your answer lets you know what type of government is over us. Samuel Adams said, "For whenever tyranny is established, immorality of every kind comes in like a torrent, right versus wrong, good versus evil. The line of demarcation between these principles has been written as if by a sunbeam. There is no gray area. The legalization of homosexuality is upon us like a torrent. Is this good? If not, then it is evil. This is a covert attack by our enemy on the family unit. The enemy used its mass media to bring about the acceptance of immoral behavior. Some behavior is contrary to the laws of nature and should be abhorred by every right-thinking individual. The money interest is using its mass media to mold our country like clay before your very eyes, slowly but surely to establish their despotic socialist state. Not only are we fighting against the tyranny of public opinion, but we are also forced to contend with the tyranny of the public debt. The national debt and the taxes that naturally accompany it have thrown such weight of power into the national government that we must think this was not intended by our patriot ancestors. Under such conditions, no man or woman can write or truly call his property his own. And the danger of slavery is no longer merely theoretical. In every government, the practice of contracting debt is certain to be abused. Right now, the principles of republicanism are at the mercy of the forces of debt and corruption. And debt is inseparable from the question of taxation. The debt is used to reap a fresh crop of taxes. As we have just witnessed with the enemy's government wanting another harvest of taxes, as we made deeper and deeper into an ocean of boundless debt. The whole funding system is dangerous to liberty, and government that relies for support on its creditors and not the affections of the people cannot last. As Thomas Jefferson said on August 19th, 1821, there does not exist an engine so corruptive of the government and so demoralizing of the nation people as public debt. The pages of history lets us know that government career of debt brings in corruption, which spins off immorality, and rottenness, which always closes in revolution. The debt is going to bring on us more ruin at home than all the invading armies abroad, against whom the military are to protect us. Either the nation must destroy public credit, or public credit will destroy the nation. The enemy's government spending has put us in a hole. The first thing to do to get out of a debt hole is to stop digging. Only fraud could suggest, and folly alone adopt spending your way out of debt. But yet the enemy uses its mass media to get the unthinking herd to vote in unscrupulous politicians who promote such a course. Like vultures, the enemy preys on the waste of public money. We are seeing our country become under the yoke of force and fraud, the natural consequences of corruption. We, the patriots with correct reasoning, are the only thing that stand between our enemy and liberty. As we continue to weaken under the increase of poverty and taxes, our window of opportunity to defeat the enemy continues to narrow. We must continue to exhaust all peaceful remedies to redress the loss of our liberty. Taxation is not liberty. These are trying times we are living in. The ends of our government have become perverted, for it has not fulfilled the ends for which it was instituted. And now public liberty is manifestly endangered, and once all means of redress have become ineffectual, we may and of right ought to throw off this government and institute a new one. The final appeal to the Second Amendment was anticipated by our learned founding fathers. As Patrick Henry said on June 5th, 1788, the Second Amendment is the means of defending our rights or of waging war against tyrants. Well, this is all that I have to say for now. Therefore, I will end it here by simply saying, take good care, post online, CC to the world. Okay, that's a couple of letters written on February the 2nd of 2013 and March the 11th of 2013 by Danny Riley. I think that gives you some visibility into his mind and his thought processes.